It's deadline day in the NBA. What will the Oklahoma City Thunder do as the clock continues to tick on trade deadline day? Who are some targets? What are some needs? What will happen? We'll talk about it all on today's show.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for InsideTheThunder.com, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, brought to you by our good friends over at PrizePicks, we're diving into the Oklahoma City Thunder trade deadline. What are they going to do? What do they need, and what will the market look like? Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA, and you can get that first deposit match up to $100. So it is deadline day, which means that this pod may never see the light of day because by the time that we finish recording it and uploading it, it might be dated, but it's a lot of fun. You know, the rumors, the speculation, players being linked here and there and everywhere. It is very interesting, and it's also very nerve-wracking. Like sand through an hourglass, these are the deadlines of our lives. Let's see what the Thunder do right now as you saw the Clippers lose, and it creates this new three-way top or four-way top across the Western Conference. Bottom line is, no matter what you want to classify them as, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 16, whatever, the Thunder are 35-16, and they are able to put themselves in position throughout this season so far as being one of the best teams in the Western Conference. They've beaten the best teams in the NBA. Like, they have gotten those wins over Minnesota, over Denver. They've gotten those wins over Boston. They've gotten those wins over some key pieces like the Clippers, like the Lakers. If they've gotten wins over, pretty much every somewhat contender, and even of course games, and teams who are contenders. Like you look at New Orleans, and when whatever you make of their season so far, they looked really good on the road in LA last night. Zion looked incredible. They've beaten New Orleans on the road, so they've gotten these quality wins over these quality teams, and they've proven to this point that they can play with anybody. Now, do they still have shortcomings? Yes, but there is no perfect roster in the NBA. There is no just amazing 18-man roster, right? Like, every team's going to have shortcomings. Every team's going to have things that they wish they were better at. And the Thunder do have weaknesses, even though they've had an amazing season to this point. And it's still been an outrageously successful year, especially comparatively to expectations. Every time that you try to put expectations or limits on this team, they're able to blow past it. But the Thunder could absolutely use a sizable, more traditional big man who can rebound. Now, don't conflate that with that they should change the way they play, or they should even rely on said player for long durations. Like, the beautiful thing about the Thunder is that they're in a position right now with all of their assets and the fact that they have matching salaries who literally do not play a second for the team to go get something of need, right? Like this, rebounding first type of player, or this player who can help with rebounding, and they could just never play him and it would be fine. It would just be a nice addition to have as an option to go to in playoff series, in critical moments of games, to have the threat of a rebounder on the bench. So, even if they did go and add size here in a few hours, it's still not going to change how they play, because they want to play this lack of size type of way to push the pace, to get out in transition, and to be able to turn that disadvantage into an advantage, as they've done all season, which has gotten them to this point on both ends, being one of the best offenses and one of the best defenses in the NBA. But they still could use the threat of someone who can go and rebound. Arguably, a bigger point in this, and a bigger need for the Thunder, in my opinion, would be a scorer shooter off the bench. Because if you look at this Thunder season, yes, the rebounding woes have been prevalent. That's also been mitigated by just effort and again, by the trade-off of purposefully being bad at rebounding, because you get to do all the other stuff, like switch defensively, like create chaos in the passing lanes, like push the pace off of misses, off of turnovers, and the like. What has really slowed them down at times has been in games where they have these dry spells on offense. And if you fix that issue, if you get a scorer who can finish plays, who can even create a little bit for themselves, at times where you're playing with a more secondary unit, that can make the Thunder and push the Thunder kind of closer to over the edge in the West than even rebounding, in certain instances. Because if you're not having those offensive dry spells and you're playing at your top level, we've seen that this team's a top 3 defense and a top 3 offense in the NBA. And for the Thunder, whenever you get into their expendable pieces, oftentimes, everyone talks a big game, right? It's easy to talk about how, you want a first round pick or multiple first round picks for players who do not at all demand that or play at that level. But when it gets down to it and the clock's about to expire, second round picks are the currency of the deadline. We see it every year. Quality veterans go for second round picks, and the Thunder have 20 tradable second round picks at their disposal. And even if they light a few of those on fire this year, they're so easy to recoup in value that it'd be worth it, even if it's just for a player who can play on the back end of the rotation, or not play at all into the fixed rotation and just get in there during spot matchups and spot minutes. So I think that the Thunder will make a trade between now and the deadline. It's just a matter of who, what, and what scale of a trade it will be. And when you look at their expendable pieces, the interesting part about it is that you can match salaries with Pokusevski, with Dallas Bertans, with Trey Mann. Those are the 3 players that I think would be expendable. I'd be very shocked to see any other player than those 3 be traded in the next few hours. And then you have the massive picks, but you can match the salary to get to the salary point with 3 guys who do not even come close to sniffing the rotation on a night in, night out basis. 3 guys who have been obsolete this season for the Thunder. And so anything you get back, even just the threat of somebody that you get back, is supremely more valuable than those players. And in a draft in 2024, where it's looked upon as a not very good draft, and I think that it does lack star power, but it does also present some interesting players who can provide this high-end role player rotational piece and at times starting level player in it, which would be good for contenders on a budget, so to say, whenever they want to cash in on some cheap, affordable talent, which this draft might be able to have at the back end of it. You have picks to spare in a draft where you probably have this picks to spare, not the developmental runway to spare for this draft, which I think has a lot of players who are going to take some time to get to the point where they can impact NBA basketball. And so even if you want to, quote unquote, overpay, like let's look at Dorian Finney-Smith, for example, one of my favorite trade targets out there. Even if you wanted to go crazy and give away a first round pick and 3 seconds for Dorian Finney-Smith, it seems like a lot of face value, but this draft, even if you give up a first round pick, you're not completely out of the 2024 draft, a draft that's not great anyway, a draft that you in all likelihood, you would not be missing out on anything tangibly right now. And you might not have, even if somebody does pop, so to say, which is the thing about the 24 draft class, somebody's going to pop. But even if they do pop, would they have popped under these circumstances of, for example, the Thunder, who are packed to the gills already before they make any other move in their rotation, and they already have guys who don't play enough, night in and night out, who you think are very talented players? Could they have popped in this environment if they were to pop somewhere else in that draft? So trading out of the 24 draft, no matter what you think about it, is not a bad idea for the Thunder, even if they give up everything, all their picks in the 24 draft. But trading one away especially would be really good for this team. So they have the expendable pieces, they have the needs, and they have a general manager who at every point in his career that he's had a talented roster has improved this team midway through the season. Look back to last year, whenever last year's team was not even guaranteed to make the play-in tournament. He went and improved the roster by getting rid of Darius Bazley and getting Saric, who's an improvement over Mike Muscala, while also stockpiling second-round picks for this very moment. So I would think that the Thunder will do something between now and the deadline. You look at Pokusevski, especially a guy who doesn't play, and we know the Thunder feel about impending restricted free agents, as we mentioned what they did to Bazley last year. That would be something that you would look at. as possibly happening today. So I think that something will happen, and they have the needs to fill on a team that's been proven to be good enough, on a team that has an MVP caliber player, a team that has two caliber all stars in Chet and J Dub. Of course, they're not going to make the game, and they didn't make the game in such a talented West and such a talented association, but they play at that level night in and night out. So the Thunder have what it takes. They just lack experience. They lack shooting. They lack rebounding and size. And folks, you can't buy experience, so to say. Now, some of these guys come with experience and come with playing in big games, which will help to a certain degree. But even so, at the end of the day, it's going to be leaned upon young guys, no matter what happens today at the deadline. So I think that whenever you look at this trade deadline, I understand the kind of anticipation and whatever sort of thing you want the Thunder to go do. It's also important to just note you got to enjoy the ride a little bit. We'll talk trade targets. We'll talk what to expect. We'll talk enjoying the ride all coming up. But first, I want to tell you right now about our good friends over at Nissan. Go check them out today at shopnissanusa.com. They have what you need because Nissan is awesome. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Even kind of going on an adventure at times, it can be something that you're drawn to. Well, guess what? Our friends over at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs that can help you take advantage of your wild side and take it to the next level on your adventurous side. So check it out today. That's the 24 Nissan Rogue. It's the perfect example for any driver that likes to get an escape. The 24 Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover that lets you go on your next adventure. It also will include 12.3 HD touchscreens, and they have that for you built in. It has Google built in to always have an assistant to help you, make calls or whatever you need hands-free. It connects to your phone. It's awesome. The Pathfinder is great as well. The 2024 Nissan Pathfinder has room for up to 8 in their expansive cargo capacity, and has advanced abilities, and it's available, of course, with the 4x4 capacity as well. And then you have the 2024 Nissan Armada. It'll help you get the full-size luxury of an SUV. So take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada to go find your big adventure at shopnissanusa.com. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you, talking Thunder basketball. Subscribe for free across all podcasting platforms so you never miss an episode, including on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Styles, and also go check out InsideTheThunder.com. That's InsideTheThunder.com by Sports Illustrated and Fan Nation. We have a lot of draft stuff out there right now, and still, of course, trade stuff out there right now, and still draft stuff will be coming, and also we'll be reacting to all the latest trades that can go on. Obviously, you can tell it was a 10-article day for me because I'm completely kaput right now, but we're going to power through it and talk about the most exciting day, one of the most exciting days of the year. I still prefer that draft free agency period than this, but this is still right up there with one of the best days of the NBA calendar. Let's talk trade targets. There's a billion of them. And again, you have to crutch all of this with, it's also important to just enjoy the ride, which we'll talk about more coming up. But some trade targets. I love Kelly Olynyk as a trade target. Doesn't seem to be a lot of fire there right now. Don't know if they'll actually move on from him, or if it'll be the Thunder who want to take advantage of him. But I love Kelly Olynyk as a guy who can play the way the Thunder want to play, and can keep the ball moving offensively. You can hide him defensively, and then you can see what he does as a play finisher for this offense. Gordon Hayward's another name that I really like because, I just view Gordon Hayward as a no-risk, high-reward move. If they're looking to buy him out anyway, why not pay a second-round pick or two to ensure that he lands in Oklahoma City? Because let's face it, on the buyout market, you never know who the player will go to. Obviously, the rules are different now with the new CBA, but still ensure that he's in-house in Oklahoma City in that move. And then even if the worst happens, even if you can never play a game for the Thunder, you give up 2 of your 20 tradable second-round picks. That's not the end of the world. That's not something that will go and break the budget for Oklahoma City or make really an impact at all in what they're able to accomplish in the future. While also, if he can play, he'll be able to really So when you look at Gordon Hayward, what he can provide for this Thunder team is that scoring threat the Thunder need. He can shoot the ball very well. Of course, he can create for himself a little bit off the bench unit. And for a guy who's dealt with some injury concerns in his career, not having to play him every single night or playing him on reduced minutes is going to be a good thing. Plus, he was around those young Celtics teams, and the Thunder are trying to do what those young Celtics teams were able to do, and that is get far in the postseason. So we can help out there if you believe in that whole idea of experience and things mattering. PJ Washington is another name that people like from Charlotte that you can keep an eye on. Bojanovic from Detroit. This would just simply be a bench score shooter who can cash in, catch and shoot threes. And you can maybe play him down the stretch of games just whenever, the games turn more situational, offense, defense on either side of the floor. But as we mentioned, my favorite trade target is Dorian Finney-Smith. Dorian Finney-Smith is a really high-end defender who can switch 1 through 5 and can really thrive 2 through 4 defensively. He's made big shots. He's gotten big stops in big moments, and he helped Luka Doncic go far and get to the Western Conference Finals. But back a few years ago when Luka was 21 years old, and it was kind of one of his first runs in the postseason. Remember, he had that bubble year. Luka did, which was in the bubble, which was great. He had the buzzer beater against the Clippers, and it was a fantastic series. But he was still very young in his actual playoff experience life because the bubble playoffs was an anomaly, was kind of unlike anything we've ever seen before, with no fans and no travel and things like that. So Dorian Finney-Smith, by all accounts, is a fantastic locker room guy, a fantastic teammate. And then when you add in the 3-and-D aspect of his game, he is somebody that you really want to see in Oklahoma City, I think, to help this team round out their rotation and round out their kind of team, especially whenever you factor in the pieces that it would take to get these guys are guys who log 0 minutes and a couple second-round picks or a first-round pick in a 24 draft that's not very good. So you're really gaining something without losing anything. It's all a net positive in that case. And I think that these guys would be some interesting targets. And then there's some loftier names out there as well. Jalen Smith from Indiana. Do the Pacers have a front court issue with log jam of trading for Pascal Siakam? I think that Jalen Smith is a short-term and long-term solution, honestly, for the Thunder. He provides a little bit more size, but it's a little bit more size that is still not sacrificing at all how the Thunder play. Like, he can help put a body on somebody, he can help down low, but he can also play this fast, switchable, versatile style of offense and defense that the Thunder want to play. And as a play finisher, he can really become someone who you can look at the perimeter to space the floor, to cash in, catch and shoot looks. And I look at Jalen Smith, and I think that you can play him with any lineup you want to. I think he can fit in with the starting 5. I think that he can fit in with the secondary unit. I think he could help enhance the all-bench lineups that you want to run out. He can especially help improve the staggered minutes whenever you have a J-Dub and a Chet on the floor together. Playing Jalen Smith alongside them really helps maximize what you're able to do, because you can throw out lineups of like J-Dub and Kaysen and Jalen Williams and Jalen Smith and Chet Holmgren and all these guys. Like, he can really improve this team from a offensive standpoint while fitting in defensively with how the Thunder want to play. There's some other great names that people have thrown around at the trade deadline. The bottom line, I think, is the Thunder are going to do something. They're going to improve this roster in some way, I really believe. We'll see if that ends up being right or not at the 2 p.m. local time deadline for Oklahoma City. But whether it's a Bruce Brown, who people are kin to right now, or a surprise move like, I think Wendell Carter Jr. at this point being traded would be a surprise to see happen. Or even if it's just Andre Drummond, who's been one of the best backup big men in the NBA to this point this season, getting him as a change of pace option would even improve this roster, because you're improving it from a net neutral, a net nothing, if you will, to at least having someone who can throw a curveball. And that's the big deal. Like, the Thunder are going to lean on who they lean on, right? Like, whoever or whatever move you would want the Thunder to make, there is no move out there that is realistic, that is possible, that is rumored. There are no players on the market right now who, if the Thunder traded for them, no matter who they are, that would change how they play basketball, that would change their hierarchy. So even if you listed out right now your wildest dreams for what would happen at the deadline, but still keep it realistic, the Thunder would still be dependent on the same cast of characters they are right now. All the Thunder can realistically achieve at the deadline would be presenting themselves the option to help them out in certain matchups in certain series. It's presenting themselves the option to play bigger, the option to play with a traditional rebounder, a more traditional big man, or giving themselves the option to get increased scoring off the bench. It's not going to completely alter how they play, completely alter their rotation, or completely alter what their identity is. There's not a guy out there that would do that. Like who out there that could realistically get moved at the deadline if they were on the Thunder would even do any of those things. Like they just at best would come in and enhance the roster, not change the roster. And I think that Kelly Olynyk, Gordon Hayward, Bogdanovich, Finney-Smith, Jalen Smith, I think that those guys, Kyle Kuzma even, they enhance the roster without changing it. Now with Kyle Kuzma, the interesting part would be, can you put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? This guy, I think that at his best, playing locked in basketball, playing the way the Thunder want him to play, would hypothetically want him to play, he could really fit in and really push the Thunder up a level from where they've been, which is saying a lot because they've been one of the best teams in the West. But can you get him reined back in like he was in those Laker days? Because he'd have the same role and same responsibility level as he did in LA. But as of right now, it doesn't appear as though Washington's truly going to trade Kyle Kuzma. So we'll see if that's even still on the table for any team, much less Oklahoma City. But it's going to be a fun time. I think that we always see the same things unfold at the deadline, right? It's a very calm before the storm. There's a little bit of activity here. Tillman gets traded to Boston. Compazio gets traded to not Compazio. Gets traded to Detroit. These things just kind of like boil over to a certain degree. And then you kind of wonder, like, oh, is there going to be a big move? Is there going to be enough to talk about? There's going to be a flurry of activity at some point between now and 3 o'clock Eastern. And I just can't wait for it. I think that the Thunder will get involved in some way. We're going to take your questions and see what you're thinking about the Thunder coming up. But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at PrizePicks. Check them out today at prizepicks.com/lockedonnba. That's prizepicks.com/lockedonnba. Because it's the best place to play daily fantasy sports. It's daily fantasy sports made easy. It's just you versus the projected numbers. You just pick more or less than their prize pick projections. It's team and time at Prize Picks. And right now, you can win 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct answers. Whenever you go there right now, you can turn $10 into $1,000. Demon and Goblins are the newest and most exciting way to play at Prize Picks. The squares marked with red demons or green goblins can get you different payouts. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. So check it out today at prizepicks.com. It's quick, offers fast withdrawals. It's easy gameplay for you to get accustomed to. It's available in Oklahoma as well. So that's a very big key for daily fantasy sports made easy. You just pick 2 to 6 players. You project where they have more or less than their prize pick projections. And if you're right, then you win money. It's that simple. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnba. That's prizepicks.com/lockedonnba, or use code all lowercase LOCKEDONNBA for your first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $100 up to $100 deposit match at prizepicks.com. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. It is trade deadline day. On tomorrow's show, we're going to recap the trade deadline winners and losers and how it all impacts Oklahoma City and what the Thunder did or didn't do at the deadline. But right now, let's talk about what you're saying about the deadline. Kyle Roberts asks, if I was a betting man, would I bet on the Thunder to make a move? Yes. I'd be very, very surprised if it gets to 301 and the Thunder did absolutely nothing. I think that it could be as small as kicking the can down the road of elongating their asset window, which they did over the summer, the last 2 summers, where they trade a current draft pick for future draft picks. Whenever those future draft picks cash in, they'll be more valuable because you'll be paying these guys more, and they'll be in better draft classes, frankly, than the 24 draft. Even something like that, all the way to something like Pokashevsky being moved because he's a restricted free agent coming up, or all the way up until a guy who can just slot into the rotation right now in the postseason. So it can be a wide range of things, but I'd be shocked if it was nothing. I'd be shocked if the Thunder did absolutely nothing. This is an interesting hypothetical from Alessandro Riggio 7. If the Thunder could pick a combination of two between Dorian Finney-Smith, Kelly Olynyk, and Bruce Brown, who would you choose? If the Thunder could only choose one of Dorian Finney-Smith, Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, who would you choose? So if you could pick a combination of two, I personally would lean Dorian Finney-Smith and Kelly Olynyk. I think that Bruce Brown's an awesome player. I think that he is someone who can really help a title team, as you saw last year, with Denver. But I don't love the contract. I don't love it. I don't love his fit in Oklahoma City just at his size. I think that it could work, but I'm not just over the moon for it. Well, as with Finney-Smith and with Kelly Olynyk, I am by far over the moon with their additions. Of the two, I'd rather have Finney-Smith. I think he plays a little bit closer to how the Thunder want to play, a lot closer to how the Thunder want to play, and just really helps you close games with the way they want to close them. Like Kelly Olynyk would help you get from point A to point B, and you could argue would help you get there, more seamlessly as a 82 game season player, and help you with your depth and everything. Whenever you're looking at closing out playoff games and how the Thunder are going to want to close out those games, to be able to throw a lineup out there of SGA, Lou Dort, Dorian Finney-Smith, J-Dub Chet would be insane. Like, it would be an insane defensive team. It'd be an insane team shooting the basketball. If Lou Dort's having a hot night shooting, if he's not, put in Isaiah Joe to close out games, put in Casey Wallace to close out games, put in Josh Giddey to close out games. Like, you have such a luxury at that point to never lose your style while maximizing what the game flow dictates. If it dictates more defense, if it dictates more offense, you're able to get it done at that point. Kelly Olynyk of Steel would be a great option. He'd be my number 1B of trade deadline targets I'd want. But I really have talked about Dorian Finney-Smith since last June, and now it's here, and there's more of a fever pitch for Dorian Finney-Smith talk. I think that he'd really, really help Oklahoma City balance the best of both worlds of not changing at all how you play, getting the data points of how this style and how this scheme and how this system and how these players react to the postseason, while still helping the roster, right? Because you don't want to change, the roster or the culture or the system before you get a chance to see it in the postseason. Dorian Finney-Smith will let you keep playing this way, but also be better than what you are currently. So it's the best of both worlds, in my opinion, for him. Blake says, Giddey, Bertans, Poku, Man, and a first for Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith. I don't think that the Nets would part with both of them, especially not for just one first-round pick. But, I don't think that that'd be a logical option. Neither is this one from Joe Smith. LaMelo Ball, PJ Washington, and Gordon Hayward for Josh Giddey, Micic, Chang, and 4 first-round picks, and Dallas Bertans. I don't think that they're going to, of course, trade LaMelo Ball. I don't think that that's very realistic. And neither is, you guys are off today on these mock trades, but we're going to do it. Pokashevsky, Jang, and 2 first-round picks for Daniel Gafford. That is a king's ransom to get Daniel Gafford. I'm not in the market for that. And then Rich Uncle Skelton, is the trade deadline overhyped? I think that if you would have asked this, I think that you probably felt this way this time a year ago, right before Kevin Durant was traded and everything broke loose, at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? It always feels slow and a slow build. And then we get to the deadline and there's just a flurry of activity. I don't think that there's going to be a massive trade that happens today. But I think that if you're a diehard NBA fan who cares about rotations, who cares about getting better in the margins, a lot of that stuff will happen today. The biggest name that you see today might be maybe DeJounte Murray, maybe. But other than that, it's still going to be impactful players shifting around, which can help and hurt teams. But you have to remember too that like Pascal Siakam counts in all this. OG Anunoby counts in all this. Just because it didn't happen on deadline day, that did happen in the course of this season. So that does count. And then Rashid says, "What do you think of getting Jonathan Isaac?" I think that Jonathan Isaac as a basketball player, you know, for what I think that the cost could realistically be, like the cost that Orlando could realistically demand, I think that would be worth exploring as a basketball player. Um, because again, there's very few players like to put a bow on this conversation. There's very few players who the Thunder could trade for that I would be like, oh, that was a bad trade. And not so much as anything of like roster construction or is the team, good or bad or whatever. They just have a surplus of assets that I trust that whatever trade that they make would be responsible. It wouldn't be 6 first-round picks for Andre Drummond, right? So the asking price, whatever it is, as long as it's a situation where it's even close to being market value, okay, try it. Like try whatever move you want to, because the matching salary right now are guys who don't play, and the picks you're not even close to being tapped out of them. And we mentioned it at the top of the show that the trade deadline is mainly built on second round picks. So you could give up to like 10 of those second round picks and not really care. You have 20 tradable second round picks. So I just don't see anyone that I would say like, absolutely not. That's a terrible trade, terrible fit, whatever, because you're giving up guys who wouldn't play anyway. So if this guy truly is a terrible fit, you just wouldn't play him. And you give up some quote unquote assets that you have a surplus of. Because I don't think they'll give up $1 billion first-round picks for anyone at this deadline. They shouldn't, because of what the market should command. So it's hard to find a bad fit at the trade deadline. It's also going to be hard to find like some flashy, huge move at this deadline. And typically those flashy, huge moves are easier and more commonly made in the summertime because it's easier to trade with salaries. It's easier to get your affairs in order. It's easier with more picks unlocked as well. Everything's easier in the summertime to make big moves. And so that's whenever you're going to see these teams make big moves. You might actually see teams right now position themselves, even like contenders, position themselves for the summertime to make those big moves rather than positioning themselves for 3 p.m. today. So we'll see how it all unfolds. We'll see who the Thunder can add, who the Thunder want to add, or what the Thunder do in general. I'd be pretty shocked if we are talking on the trade deadline recap show at 3:01 p.m. if the Thunder did nothing. But I'd also be pretty shocked if we're talking at 3:01 p.m. as an earth-shattering, rotational shattering, starting lineup shattering move. So it'll be somewhere in the middle, as it typically is. But the biggest thing is just enjoy the ride. This team is not perfect. No team in the NBA is. This Thunder team is tops in the West right now. They've won big games both home and on the road. They've beaten tough teams. They've beaten the best of the best teams both home and on the road. They've done their job to this point. And that they have a team that's valid and that is good no matter what they do in a couple of hours. But no matter what, we're going to recap it all on today's on Locked On Thunder. So subscribe anywhere you get your podcast from, including on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Ryland_Styles. And until tomorrow, be good and be good to one another.